Ghouls, Days of Glory, a game series by Frederick Bay. This is version 1814, stacking and reinforcements. So markers and counters of the Commanders-in-Chief, so Commanders-in-Chief, leader markers basically, do not count for stacking limits. Following may be stacked in the same hex. So this is what may be stacked in a single hex. 2 units of the same type, meaning infantry, cavalry, or artillery, and of the same formation. So again, the colored stripe, always behind the name of the unit. 1 artillery unit, foot or horse artillery, of any formation may combine with 1 or 2 infantry units. 1 artillery unit, foot or horse artillery, of any formation may combine with 1 cavalry unit, or 2 artillery units of different formations. Exceptions. There are exceptions. Routed units need not be of the same formation. That's interesting. The limit of 2 infantry or cavalry units is raised to 3 if the total number, this is for small strength units, so the limit of 2 infantry or cavalry units is raised to 3 if the total number of strength points of the 2 units is 6 or less. Again, strength points is usually in the bottom left of the counters. Note, if rallying or disordered unit causes the total number of strength points to exceed 6, rallying is not allowed. It would be necessary for the unit to leave the stack first. The following may not stack together: a routed unit and a unit in good order or disorder, a unit in square and a unit not in square, and a unit and an infantry unit and a cavalry unit. So 1 infantry, 1 cavalry are never in the same hex. A routed unit can't be with any other unit. A routed unit can't be with a non-routed unit. And then a unit in square cannot be with a unit that is not in square. Okay, effects of stacking on movement. A unit may not enter or pass through a hex occupied by an enemy unit, obviously. A unit entering a hex occupied by another unit is placed at the bottom of the stack. So stacking is important and relevant. Exception. In a stack of units, the artillery unit is always placed on top. So that's easy to remember. Artillery always on top. The stacking order may be modified freely at the beginning of the activation phase of the units involved. So units involved means the units of the activated formation, I'm assuming. Before movement. The stacking limits apply at the end of movement of each unit, including refusal of shock combat. Okay, however, stacking limits are checked continuously during forced marches. I think I remember going over that before. And during recoil and retreat after combat. At these times, exceeding the stacking limit is either prohibited or may require a cohesion test as a penalty. So I guess that's specified in each applicable part of the rules, I'm guessing. At the end of the movement, a routed unit must be alone in its hex. Oh, there we go. So at the end of movement, a routed unit must be alone in its hex, or if there is no other solution, stacked with 1 other routed unit. Okay. A routed unit may not be stacked with a unit that is in good order or disorder at the end of the movement. During the course of the movement phase, however, another unit may pass through a hex occupied by a routed unit with no other penalty than the +1 movement point cost. Okay. Effects of stacking on combat. Stacking limits apply for the duration of combat, shock or fire. The effects are as follows. An artillery unit stacked with infantry or cavalry may fire. Units in a stack may attack together. To attack with one while not engaging the other is prohibited, okay, unless one of the 2 is disordered. Actually, that's kind of a particular thing to remember. I'm actually running this game so far. There are like a half a dozen little particular rules that could easily be buried and wouldn't necessarily come to mind when you think about, I guess if you think of this game as being too simple. It's not complex. I've said before, I think this is a solid 4 on a scale of 10, but But I think superficially it looks even at least a bit simpler than that, but it's not. If stacked units engage in shock combat, their strength points are totaled, with the exception of artillery units, and for the attacker, disordered units. And only the top attacking unit must pass an engagement test if one is required. If this unit fails the engagement test, no unit in the stack may engage in shock. If an artillery unit is the top unit in a stack, the infantry or cavalry unit directly below it undergoes the engagement test. Artillery fire and the results of shock affect all the units in a stack. If a stack has to make a cohesion test as a result of shock or fire, a cohesion test die roll is made separately for each unit in the stack. Okay, so you're not doing the cohesion test as a result of combat, only with the unit on top. You still have to check every unit in the stack. Your stacks are never going to be very big. Your stacks are basically 1, 2, or 3 units. You could have more counters in the hex, but you basically have 1, 2, or 3 units. All right. Reaction fire and counter battery fire affect only the top unit in a stack. Okay, so reaction fire and counter battery fire as particular kinds of fire combat, those do affect only the top unit in a stack. Well, that's interesting. Okay. Again, another particular thing to remember. If a cohesion test is required, only the top unit in the stack makes the test. Exception: a player employing reaction fire against a mixed stack of units, infantry or cavalry plus artillery, may decide before firing to apply the results to the infantry or cavalry unit located immediately below the artillery. Yeah, okay. Counter battery fire, on the other hand, only affects the artillery unit which provoked it. Okay. Reinforcements. Reinforcements enter play when their activation marker, their AM, has been put into the cup and is then drawn randomly. That's funny wording. All right, I guess they enter play when you put their activation marker in the cup. I guess they're in play if their marker's in the cup. Okay. Procedure. For the turn during which a formation's arrival as a reinforcement is scheduled by the scenario, only one of its 2 activation markers is placed in the cup. If the 2 activation markers have different values, place the one with the higher initiative value in the cup. If the activation marker, which would allow the entry of the reinforcements, is not drawn randomly during the turn in which it was put in play, that is, because it's the last chit in the cup, after all drawings, the reinforcements are delayed and the procedure is repeated on the following turn, but this time with both of the formation's activation markers placed in the cup, thus making their arrival during that turn certain. Exception: if the units arriving as reinforcements belong to a non-demoralized formation, some of whose units are already on the map, the 2 activation markers are both used because they are already in play. Okay. Reinforcements enter the map having received orders, so they don't arrive under no orders, and using forced march. Oh, I got to remember that. I remembered the other things up to this point about reinforcements. All right, they're treated as using forced march, without the commander-in-chief having to expend an order. Place Renfort or reinforcement markers on them as a reminder, okay? As soon as a unit of the formation is within 5, okay, that's the reminder. The reminder is they're force marching, right? I think so. As soon as a unit of the formation is within 5 hexes of an enemy unit, this is an exception to the earlier rule, or simply at the owner's choice. During phase A, that is at the start of the turn sequence, it loses its reinforcement status and the marker is removed. The unit then assumes the status of no orders. Okay, that's the reminder. The reminder is that it's under orders. The commander-in-chief does not have to expend an order. and it's using forced march still until the marker is removed. Okay. The Commander-in-Chief will have to expend an order later to place the unit along with its formation with received orders. The status of reinforcement applies individually to each unit and may be extended to the following turn. The player may also freely choose to have his reinforcement units enter normal. Okay, so you can enter normal march. But in this case, the units lose their ability to perform a forced march and are considered as having no orders. Okay, so it's normal movement, no orders, or it's with orders and forced march. Okay. However, during the activation phase in which they enter the map, they still benefit from the normal movement rate. Oh, instead of the reduced movement rate as applies to units that have no orders. Okay, that's definitely an exception. Again, they're under no orders if you choose to come on with normal movement, but they have their full movement allowance, not half movement allowance. That's funny. They should have just, why didn't they just keep it simple and say, no, they come on the map, they have no orders, therefore the movement is halved. I don't know. Exception. If an enemy unit happens to be within 5 hexes or less of the entry hex, the reinforcements enter the map with received orders, but only for the turn in question, without forced march and without a renfort or reinforcements marker. Okay. Entering the map. Units of reinforcements enter the map by the hex designated in this scenario, as if they were in column, one behind the other. They may enter in stacks. The second stack of the formation paying double the cost of the entry hex, and so on. 3 times the cost for the next stack, 4 times the cost for the next stack, etc. If one or more units of a formation or a formation of reinforcements are unable to enter the map during the assigned turn, either because of insufficient movement points or because of stacking limits, their entry is delayed until the first activation marker of their formation is drawn on the following turn. Okay. Reinforcement hexes. No unit may occupy an entry hex of enemy reinforcements or a hex adjacent to it before all scheduled reinforcements have entered. That's, again, is just a particular way of doing things. That doesn't seem familiar to me from others' rules, but again, I don't play this scale and scope very often. But okay, so you can't sit on reinforcement. You can't sit on the enemy's reinforcement hexes. When I started to read this very short section, it's over, reinforcement hexes, I thought it was going to say something. I mean, I'm used to, okay, if the enemy is sitting on the reinforcement hex, then you have to move X number of hexes away. Yeah, okay. But here, no. You can't sit on the hex or adjacent or a hex adjacent to it until all scheduled reinforcements have entered the map.